Okay, so here are some more questions that have been submitted to osmvision.wetransfer.com. Remember, you can send your questions in as well by filming yourself, asking your 3 questions that you would like us to answer for you, and we will do so. All right, let's get into the questions that we've received.
I realized that the mixing of languages just around the world was key to the disintegration of the truth. And with the English language being such a low form of like vibrationally for communication, I'm wondering what your truth is around what our communication is going to look like in, let's say, like 5 years.
Oh, that's such a great question. Thank you for your questions. What is important about these questions is that never think your question is silly or too complicated, because you never know who around the world is listening and may want to know the answer to your question, or that you may spark something off in them or probe them to ask a question that they've got that, they may be, shy of asking. So that question you've asked, it shows you're very in tune. Now, when we talk about the English, as you've explained, language, which people call a language, but it's really a dialect, unless you're a linguist and somebody that takes the time out to study languages or study a language other than your own, you may not realize that there's a lot to language. Phonetically, the tones and the vibrations that, the sounds that are being used to utter the words in the language, how they affect you vibrationally, and so forth and so forth. So when you look at the world today and say, what is the most spoken language? As you've said, people will say English. But we know that English is a combination of words from, like German, Yiddish, from French, from, Latin, from many, many different previous languages that have been put together to create this dialect. And it was done intentionally and purposefully because of the low vibration. When you're thinking about beings who went around the world to make sure that English is the most spoken language around the world, and to exert that influence on other cultures and other races to the point where many cultures have diminished or given up their own culture. How you notice this is that when you look at, say, the United Nations, where you have different nations sitting around a table, go back many years ago and see how representatives from different countries would come with their attire and their culture. But over time, even, you look at the Chinese and, the Japanese and African countries, and you start to see people are now all wearing suits and ties and have, in a way, given up their own culture. And it's the same way with the English language that is widely spoken around the world. And so to go to your question and say, what's going to be spoken in the future, when you're dealing with raising the vibration, this is why we as the original people on the planet spoke the original language known by many names, such as Nuapic, and we refer to it in our language as Misbatia. It's been known by Sabaic. It's been known, and this is not just us saying this. You can look at what has been found in by way of things that have been written. You go back to the pyramids in Egypt and see the hieroglyphics. You go to the Sumerian text, you will see the cuneiform. But ultimately, you find the Sabaic plates that have been found, and you will see our script that is used throughout, these different cultures. Because being the original, you will find traces of it which has been borrowed. And we have a lot of information in a book put out by our master teacher, Pana Bambianu, known as The Language of Time. And so people will hear some words in the Arabic, in the, what people can call Hebrew, in the Latin and in different languages, because they come from the root language Mispatia, and that is a high vibrational language. And so in the future, this is the language that we will be speaking, or those who want to raise their vibration and their consciousness to a higher level will need to learn Mispatia, our language. And many people are fluent in this language. And if you think about the origins of how English started and how it went around the world, this is the same thing that's going to happen with Mispatia. So it will take time. It may be that, the children that are born into Wu-Sabat, they learn in this just like you learn a language when you're born into your family and you hear it being spoken by your parents and, family members. It will be the same, all right? So Mispatia is the language of the future. Wu-Sabat is the future. And so, yes, that's what you we would say to learn to speak. Okay, let's move on to the second question.
Over the past 8 years doing my own research, and then recently finding your work, I have realized that what I have kind of formulated and what Wu-Sabat's philosophies are align really well. My question, though, is I'm thoroughly convinced that the African people and the Negroes that were scattered among nations through all over the world, are two different bloodlines. I would really like to know your opinions around this.
Okay, another great question. And I can feel your energy, you've done your own research, you've done your own work, and I can feel the vibration. And that's, again, another excellent question. We teach in Wu-Sabat that there are 9 different species of what you're considering or calling Negroid. And so even though we share the same color skin suit, we're actually made up of different species. And if you look at the history of what people consider the Negroid, with every enslavement and not all Africans were enslaved, by the way. So you have those who were and you have those who were not, and that are indigenous to the planet. And even when we say African people, if the origins of civilization and people on the planet comes from Africa, then in essence, everyone is an African. Although we don't really subscribe to that tone. So we say Afaf Reye Ka'u, or Africans, that's the proper tones. But really, we know that when you research the Berlin Conference and you research the slave trades, both in the 1600s and the 1400s, by both the Arabs as well as the Europeans, you find out that those who were taken were stripped off of their language and were stripped off of their culture, and to the point where it was such a horrific strategy, even in terms of separating families, castrating people, just so that you don't have any remembrance or any memory of who and what you are. So you get this notion of the ones that would be easily influenced by, the foreigners, whether the Europeans or the Arabs or whoever else, they would be referred to as, in the case of slavery, you would have like the house slaves, or the house negroids, and then you'll have the field ones, right? And this was a strategy by where they would reward those ones that would do the work of the slave master. And so you have a different mentality of beings. It's the same thing when you look at, when you're dealing with like the Moors, for example. You had the Moors that were Morenos, who were actually, again, a similar process where they would do the slave master's work. And so they were favored or given perks and to help enslave their own people. And till this day, you have in leadership where most of what people consider to be Negroes especially when you look at certain organizations like the NNACP and, these organizations that were set up to support Negroids. You'll find out that a lot of them were the product of, the rapes between the slave masters and the Africans, and these offspring were referred to or known as mulatto, or the mulattoes. And so it's a deep question you're asking, because there are different types of Africans or Negroids, and this is where the problem comes in, because you have those who look the same but don't have the same mentality, and you have those who they love being subjugated, and they never talk about separation. And so the people that are in high powered positions often are these mulattoes, because they're the gatekeepers to not allow people who speak pure truth. And so it's always a watered down version. And then you have new Negroids that have actually been bred over time, over the last 400 years. Being from, say, Haiti, Senegal, not all, but there are remnants of different beings from these different places who do not think the same or have that, mentality of speaking truth and standing for what is right. So you ask a very, very deep question, that you're right, there are different species, and often there are conflicts between these species, or, there are terms used like, being a mulatto, being a coconut, being a sellout, being somebody that is an Uncle Tom, etc., etc. So it's very important to differentiate those that are standing up for what's truth and what is right. And as you say, many have been unalived, imprisoned. We can go from your noble Joe Ali to Marcus Garvey to Malcolm X to Martin Luther King, to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, to even today with the master teacher Pana Babyanun and Dr. Malachi Z. York, and the ones who really speak truth on they're just like pushed down and suppressed. And so those of us who were students of these teachers, of these leaders you mentioned, again, it's a similar thing. You're going to find those who will teach the truth all the way, and you'll find those who will only teach it, based on their own ulterior motives, or they're actually doing the work of the slave master. And it's really down to a person listening to be able to discern and to know and be able to pick out the differences, because many people can give out information, but when it comes to true liberation, and like you say, the foundations of the future, like a language is something that is so critical, because all races have their own language, all cultures that have a culture have their own language, and this is why Wu-Sabat it's in a class of its own. It stands out completely different to all others, and we must learn and use our own language to be able to communicate in those high tones and higher vibrations. All right, so let's move on to your last and final question.
I am seeing this beautiful rise of Black men coming and taking massive presence around, the truth being told, and you are definitely one of them. My question is, I feel that for you guys to fully move into your true rightful place, that the white man has to call the white man first for all of the atrocities that they have committed on humanity. I would like to know your thoughts and opinions around when this shift could potentially come.
Wow, Good questions. Again, when we say the white man, it's a generalization, but I know and I understand or understand what you're asking. And I say that to say that, again, even with other races, there are different species. Just like I mentioned with the Negroid, there are 9 species. You have what people are referring to as the white man. They have 6 species. And you have, other races like the Mangalu or the Mongoloids, they have, 3 species, and there are different species. And so we can't always generalize, but we're talking about a specific being referred to as the Adamites, who are the ones that were bred by these disagreeable extraterrestrials, and they're the ones that have been running havoc on the planet and bringing about a lot of the chaos on the planet that deals with, the different atrocities that have been caused to all different races on the planet. So we are specifically dealing with those. And when you say, when will this happen? They were actually, according to their own records in the Bible, given 6,000 years to see if they could be reformed. And they were given 6,000 years to rule and have dominion over the planet. And that time ended in the year 2000. So it's actually ended, and they're now becoming extinct because it was by natural nature programmed into their DNA by the higher beings, all right, known as the Natharu, who programmed their telomeres, which are the end of the chromosomes, only to be able to live for 6,000 years. And that 6,000 years ended as of the year 2000 AD, as we are taught by Parnabab Yanun, Dr. Malachi Z. the master teacher. So in relation to your question, that time has already ended. This is also picked up in the Quran as the guilty blue-eyed would be judged, right? So when you look at that statement, not everyone has blue eyes, and it's specifically relating to those original Nordics or the blonde-haired, blue-eyed beings that were grafted by way of their makers or their overlords known as the Pleiadians, who also have blonde hair and blue eyes, which is relating to that whole thing with, with Hitler trying to create a superior race. And so if you actually look around today, there aren't that many people of natural blonde hair and blue eyes, because when they're time to become extinct, it's like any other creature on the planet. When it's your time to become extinct, there's nothing you can do to reverse that process. Hence, the fertility rate is dropped so much so that it's irreversible. You can do research on this and find this out. So to answer your question, that time has already started. And again, you're so in tune and vibrating because on the right frequency, because I picked this up today, and this scroll is called Judgment Upon the Adamites, which is referring specifically to these Adamites that are the ones that have caused most of the chaos on the planet. And so, yes, I was just literally saying that to your previous question, that we have to step up. We have to teach the truth regardless. And they will do, the adverse forces, principalities in higher places will do everything to stop people waking up on the planet, rising to a higher consciousness. And this is what's happened with many leaders that have come to teach the truth. But we're in that day and time that was prophesied to come, and it's not going to be a easy ride or easy journey. As you say, they have to be held accountable, but not by us, but through natural nature. And even what's going on around the world today, you can see there are wars going on. You're looking at, if you look at the wars that took place before, with the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, First World War and Second World War, you see what Hitler was doing, with the Third Reich and the Nazi. They were, constantly fighting. This is dealing with Germany. And you find out that after the wars, a lot of the people that were in the Third Reich who never really lost the war, although Germany did. A lot of the scientists, they all came to America, most of them, to Europe and to America. You look at, Nikola Tesla, you look at Albert Einstein, you look at a lot of the Germans, they came to America. And even the British, the British monarchy, they have ties to Germany. So it's a very interesting question you're asking, because that time has come where we have to speak truth. We have to go through the metamorphosis of, people trying to hide the truth. So the wars that are going on today in Iraq, or the wars that went on in Iraq, a lot of that was to do with, ancient findings that they were finding of the Anunnaki, and tablets that explained and showed information that was hidden. And it's the same thing happening now. You look at Russia and Ukraine, that territory was known as Mongolia, which, belonged to, it didn't belong to any of the people that are fighting for the lands, like in Gaza and even in what's being called Ukraine today. And it's a sad situation to see the many lives that are being lost for territory, and for beings to try and take over and claim something that doesn't even belong to them. And so you look at, what the Third Reich did, the Nazi parties, and what they were doing, and you look at what's going on today, you can find a lot of similarities. It's like history repeating itself. So yes, you're right that this period known as Judgment upon the Adamites, if you want to learn more about who the Adamites are, these are the beings that were grafted and created by the Pleiadians to rule for 6,000 years, and that time has come to an end. And now it's about people, humanity, everyone waking up. Those who want to elevate and raise their consciousness will find the truth and will come across Wu-Sabat. And so thank you for your questions. It's nothing that's worth anything comes easily. So you have to, fight for what is right, stand for truth, and help the world become a better and peaceful place for those who live on it to coexist in harmony. And that's what Wu-Sabat teaches, and that's what we teach. And I want to thank you for your kind words. I'm only a student teacher of the great master teacher, Pa Nabab Yanun, Dr. Malachi Z. York, whom we love very much and want to see home very soon. And it's down to everyone to help make that happen, because if you study his works and study what he has done and has been teaching, from the 1960s, 62 till now, you will find out that there's nothing but truth in his works. Even if he taught religion, when we went through the religious school, it was still given to you in its most pristine and accurate form, So there came a time where we had to graduate from that, because religions are based on these lies and these stories, and based on beliefs and not facts. And so when you put it to the test, you will find that for yourself. And we get a lot of comments in our Telegram group, in our classes, from people from all around the world who are finding Wu-Sabat and finding that it relates to truth, because whatever you're into, that you're learning or teaching or researching, that is truth, will align with other truths. And we say truth is truth. That's what the master teacher always said, truth is truth. Regardless, you have to teach the truth. So thank you for your questions. And lastly, anybody else who would like to ask us questions, remember, send them to osmvision.wetransfer.com. All right? Until the next time, Wadu.